Chapter 1. The Contract. The marriage contract felt heavier than it should have in Serafina Vale's trembling hands. At 19, she'd imagined her wedding day would involve white roses, happy tears, and a man who looked at her like she was his entire world. Instead, she stood in the marble-cold conference room of Blackthorn Industries, staring at legal documents that would bind her to a stranger for the next 5 years. Miss Vale. The voice cut through her spiraling thoughts like a blade through silk. She looked up to find Dante Blackthorn himself standing in the doorway, his presence immediately commanding every atom of oxygen in the room. At 31, he was everything the business magazines claimed, devastatingly handsome in a way that felt dangerous, with jet black hair perfectly styled and steel gray eyes that seemed to catalog her every weakness. His charcoal suit probably cost more than her family's mortgage payment, Mr. Blackthorn. She forced herself to stand straighter, even though her knees felt like water. Her father had drilled into her the importance of this moment. Their family's textile business hung by a thread, and this marriage was the only thing standing between them, and complete financial ruin. He moved into the room with predatory grace, not bothering to close the door behind him. "I trust you've reviewed the terms." It wasn't a question. Everything about Dante Blackthorn suggested he was a man who expected compliance, not conversation. Serafina glanced down at the contract again, her eyes catching on the most important clause. The marriage will be consummated within 24 hours of the ceremony to ensure legal validity. Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd been trying not to think about that particular requirement. "I have," she managed, proud that her voice didn't crack. "Though I have to ask, why me? Surely there are other ways to acquire my father's company without—" She gestured vaguely at the space between them. Something flickered across his expression, too quick to interpret. "Your father's business interests align with my expansion plans. This arrangement ensures a smooth transition while providing your family with financial security." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing quarterly projections instead of marriage. "The personal aspect is merely a legal formality. Merely a formality." The words stung more than they should have. Serafina had grown up watching her parents' love story, how her father still brought her mother coffee in bed every morning, how they still held hands during movies. She'd always assumed she'd find something similar someday. "And after 5 years?" she asked. "The marriage dissolves. Your family keeps their business. I keep the expansion rights, and we both move on with our lives." He pulled out his phone, checking something with the casual indifference of a man who'd just scheduled a dental cleaning instead of a wedding. "The ceremony is at 4 this afternoon. My assistant will send you the address." "This afternoon?" The words came out as a squeak. "But shouldn't we at least get to know each other?" There was something that might have been amusement in his voice, but his expression remained stone cold. "Miss Vale, this is a business transaction. The less we complicate it with sentiment, the smoother everything will proceed." He was already turning to leave when she found her voice again. "Wait." Dante paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "I need to know one thing," Serafina said, surprised by her own boldness. "Are you always this cold, or is it just for special occasions?" For a moment, something shifted in his gray eyes, a flash of surprise, maybe even respect. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "You'll find out tonight," he said quietly, and then he was gone, leaving her alone with the contract and the terrifying reality of what she was about to do. Chapter 2. The Wedding. The courthouse wedding was exactly as romantic as Serafina had expected, which was to say, not at all. She wore a simple ivory dress she'd bought off the rack that morning, her hands shaking as she applied lipstick in the bathroom mirror. Her parents waited outside, her mother's eyes red from crying, her father's face tight with the kind of guilt that came from sacrificing your daughter's happiness for financial survival. Dante arrived precisely on time, because of course he did. He'd changed into a different suit, still expensive, still perfectly tailored, still making him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled, "Men Who Could Destroy Your Life Without Breaking a Sweat." The ceremony lasted exactly 7 minutes. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that probably cost more than Serafina's car, and when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Dante's kiss was perfunctory, professional, like he was sealing a deal instead of a marriage. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackthorne," he murmured against her lips, and the sound of her new name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. The reception was at his penthouse, a sprawling space high above the city that screamed money and power. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, and artwork that belonged in museums. About 30 people milled around with champagne glasses, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of the society pages. Serafina recognized a few faces from business magazines and gossip columns. "Smile," Dante said quietly, his hand settling on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. "We're supposed to be newlyweds." She pasted on what she hoped was a convincing smile, but inside her stomach was churning. Every few minutes, someone would approach to offer congratulations, and Dante would introduce her with the same polite distance he might use for a new business partner, which she supposed was exactly what she was. "How did you two meet?" asked Miranda Ashford, the wife of one of Dante's business associates. She was the kind of woman who probably spent more on skincare than Serafina's family spent on groceries, all sharp angles and predatory curiosity. Serafina opened her mouth, realizing she had no idea what story they were supposed to tell, but Dante smoothly intervened. "Serafina's family has been in textiles for 3 generations, he said, his hand tightening fractionally on her waist. "I was impressed by her business acumen during our negotiations." It was technically true, even if it painted a wildly different picture than reality. Serafina had been present for exactly 1 meeting, and her primary contribution had been sitting quietly while her father tried to negotiate terms that wouldn't completely destroy their family legacy. "How romantic," Miranda purred, but her eyes suggested she smelled something fishy, a true meeting of minds. "Among other things," Dante replied smoothly, and the way he looked at Serafina in that moment, like she was something he wanted to devour, made her breath catch in her throat. It was an act, she knew that, but her body didn't seem to care about the distinction. The party wound down around 10, guests trickling out with air kisses and promises to do lunch soon. Serafina helped gather empty glasses, needing something to do with her hands until Dante caught her wrist. "Leave it," he said. "The staff will handle it." Right. Staff. Because normal people had staff to clean up after their fake wedding receptions. Suddenly, they were alone in the cavernous space, and the silence stretched between them like a live wire. The contract's terms echoed in Serafina's mind, consummated within 24 hours. She glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner, 10:43 p.m. Still plenty of time, technically, but the weight of expectation was crushing. "I should show you to your room," Dante said, his voice carefully neutral. "My room?" She blinked in surprise. "Did you think we'd be sharing?" There was that almost amusement again, but his expression remained unreadable. "This is a business arrangement, remember. You'll have your own space." Relief and disappointment warred in her chest. "But the contract will be fulfilled." His gray eyes met hers, and there was something in them she couldn't identify. "But that doesn't mean we need to pretend this is something it's not." He led her down a hallway, lined with more expensive art, stopping at a door near the end. The room beyond was beautiful, all soft grays and cream, with a king-sized bed that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Her single suitcase sat forlornly on the bench at the foot of the bed. "There's an ensuite bathroom," Dante said, nodding toward another door, "and the closet is fully stocked. My assistant took the liberty of purchasing some things in your size." Serafina ran her fingers along. The silk of a dress hanging in the open closet, easily worth more than she made in a month at her part-time job at the bookstore. "You didn't need to. You're my wife now," he said simply. Appearances matter. The word wife sounded strange in his voice, like he was testing out a foreign language. "Dante." She turned to face him, and something in her expression must have caught him off guard, because he went very still. "I know this isn't real for you. I know I'm just a means to an end, but I need you to understand. This is my life, my family's future, so whatever happens between us, I need to know you'll honor the contract." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the strangest feeling he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. "I always honor my contracts, Serafina," he said quietly. Then after a pause, get some rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss how this is going to work. He was almost to the door when she called his name again. For what it's worth, she said, I'm sorry it has to be like this. You deserve better than a fake wife, and I deserve better than a fake husband. Something shifted in his face, a crack in that perfect, cold composure. For just a second, he looked almost vulnerable. Good night, Mrs. Blackthorne, he said. And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the beautiful room that felt like a gilded cage. Chapter 3. The morning after that never was. Serafina woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting realization that she was married. Her first thought was relief. She'd half expected Dante to appear in the middle of the night to fulfill their contractual obligations with the same cold efficiency he brought to everything else. Her second thought was confusion when she noticed the envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a brief note in sharp, masculine handwriting. Something came up at the Singapore office. Had to fly out this morning. We'll discuss the contract when I return. She stared at the paper, a strange mix of disappointment and reprieve washing over her. Part of her had been terrified of their wedding night, but another part, a part she didn't want to examine too closely, had been curious about what it would be like to crack through Dante Blackthorne's icy exterior. Mrs. Blackthorne? A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair stood in the doorway. I'm Elena Santos, Mr. Blackthorne's housekeeper. He asked me to make sure you had everything you needed. Oh. Serafina scrambled to pull on a robe, suddenly aware she was in nothing but an oversized t-shirt. You don't need to. I can take care of myself. Elena smiled warmly. I've prepared breakfast in the dining room, but I can bring it here if you prefer. Dining room is fine, Serafina said quickly. She needed to start acting like she belonged here, even if she felt like an imposter. The dining room was as intimidating as the rest of the penthouse. A massive table that could seat 20, with place settings that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Elena had set out coffee, fresh fruit, and what looked like homemade croissants. How long have you worked for Dante? Serafina asked as Elena poured coffee into a cup so delicate she was afraid to touch it. 8 years, Elena replied. Since he bought this place. He's a good man, even if he doesn't always show it. There was something in the older woman's voice, a fondness that seemed at odds with the cold, calculating businessman Serafina had met. Has he ever... She hesitated, not sure how to phrase the question. Has he brought other women here? No, Elena said immediately. You're the first wife he's brought home. The way she said first suggested there might be others in the future, which sent an unexpected stab of jealousy through Serafina's chest. This was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, she reminded herself. 5 years and done. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Lily. How was the wedding night? Did you rock his world? Serafina nearly choked on her coffee. She'd told Lily the basics. Family business in trouble. Marriage of convenience to save it. But had left out the more intimate details of the contract. He had to travel for business, she texted back. On his wedding night? What kind of workaholic did you marry? The kind who could buy and sell small countries before lunch, apparently. But Serafina kept that thought to herself. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. Elena showed her around the penthouse, explaining how everything worked. The smart home system that controlled lighting and temperature, the fully stocked wine cellar, the rooftop terrace with its breathtaking view of the city. It was like being given a tour of a museum where she was somehow allowed to touch things. When does he usually come back from business trips? Serafina asked as they stood on the terrace, watching the sun set over the skyline. It depends, Elena replied diplomatically. Sometimes a few days, sometimes a few weeks. Weeks. The contract specified consummation within 24 hours. But what if Dante simply didn't come back? What if this was his way of getting out of the marriage without technically breaking their agreement? That evening, Serafina called her parents from the privacy of her room. How are you settling in, sweetheart? Her mother asked, and Serafina could hear the worry in her voice. It's fine, Mom. The penthouse is beautiful, and Elena, That's his housekeeper. Has been really kind. And Dante? How is married life treating you? Serafina stared out the window at the city lights. He's traveling for business. There was a pause. On his wedding night? It's complicated, Serafina said, which was the understatement of the century. Honey, I know this wasn't the wedding you dreamed of, her mother said softly, but maybe this could turn into something real. Your father and I, we had an arranged marriage too, you know. That was different. You two fell in love. After we were married, her mother reminded her. Love isn't always lightning strikes and fairy tales. Sometimes it's choosing to care about someone every day until that choice becomes as natural as breathing. After they hung up, Serafina lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mother's words echoed in her head, but it was hard to imagine choosing to love someone who treated marriage like a business merger. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was D. Blackthorne of Blackthorne Industries. Calm, and her heart jumped despite herself. Serafina, delayed in Singapore, should be back by Friday. Elena has my credit cards if you need anything. Dante, it was possibly the most impersonal email in the history of communication, but she found herself reading it 3 times anyway, looking for some hint of warmth or personality. There was none. She started to type a reply. Something polite about hoping his business went well, but deleted it. If he wanted impersonal, she could do impersonal too. Instead, she set her phone aside and tried to sleep, trying not to think about the fact that her husband of one day was on the other side of the world, and she had no idea when or if he was coming back to honor the contract that had bound them together. Chapter 4. Unexpected Visitor. 3 days into her marriage, Serafina was starting to feel like a ghost haunting someone else's life. She'd explored every inch of the penthouse, read 2 books from Dante's extensive library, mostly business biographies and philosophy, though she'd been surprised to find a few well-worn novels tucked away, and had awkward conversations with Elena about grocery preferences and cleaning schedules. She was curled up on the massive sofa in the living room, attempting to make sense of a book on corporate strategy when the elevator chimed. Her heart jumped. Maybe Dante had come back early, but the voice that called out wasn't his. Dante. I know you're here, you workaholic bastard. A woman emerged from the elevator like she owned the place. She was probably in her late 20s, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of effortless beauty that suggested excellent genetics and expensive maintenance. Her designer dress probably cost more than Serafina's entire wardrobe. The woman stopped short when she spotted Serafina on the couch. Oh, and you are? Serafina, she said, standing up and immediately feeling underdressed in her jeans and sweater. I'm the new assistant? The woman's smile was sharp. I'm Victoria Nash. Dante and I have been close friends for years. Is he in his office? Close friends. The way she said it made Serafina's stomach clench with an emotion she didn't want to name. He's traveling, Serafina said. Singapore, I think. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. He left his assistant alone in his penthouse? That's unlike him. She moved further into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. I hope you know how to handle confidential information. Dante values his privacy above all else. Actually, I'm not his assistant. Serafina lifted her chin, surprised by her own boldness. I'm his wife. The silence that followed was so complete that Serafina could hear her own heartbeat. Victoria's face went through several expressions: surprise, disbelief, and then something that looked dangerously close to rage. His what? We were married 3 days ago, Serafina said, and she was proud that her voice remained steady. That's impossible. Victoria laughed, but there was nothing amusing about the sound. Dante doesn't do relationships. He certainly doesn't do marriage. We've talked about this extensively. The implication hung in the air between them like poison. Victoria and Dante had discussed marriage, his refusal to get married, which meant they were definitely more than just close friends. Well, he does now, Serafina said, fighting to keep her voice level. Would you like me to give him a message? Victoria stared at her for a long moment, and Serafina had the uncomfortable feeling she was being evaluated and found wanting. You know what? Victoria smiled, and it was all teeth. I think I'll wait to hear this directly from him. You don't mind if I make myself comfortable, do you? I practically live here anyway. She moved toward the kitchen like she owned the place, and Serafina felt a surge of anger. This was supposed to be her home now, at least temporarily. She wasn't about to be displaced by some ex-girlfriend with boundary issues. Actually, I do mind, Serafina said, following Victoria into the kitchen. This is my home now, and my husband isn't here to entertain visitors. Victoria turned to face her, and for a moment, her mask slipped. There was real pain in her eyes, quickly covered by anger. Your husband, she repeated mockingly. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Dante Blackthorne doesn't have relationships. He has arrangements, business deals, and when those deals stop being profitable, he discards them like yesterday's newspaper. Maybe you don't know him as well as you think, Serafina replied, though privately she wondered if Victoria might be right. I've known him for 8 years, Victoria said. I know that he has nightmares about his father. I know that he takes his coffee black because adding anything else feels like weakness. I know that he's never said I love you to anyone, because love is just another word for vulnerability, and vulnerability gets you destroyed. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Victoria knew things about Dante that Serafina might never learn, intimate details that came from years of whatever they'd shared. If you know him so well, Serafina said quietly, then you know he honor his commitments. He married me. That means something, does it? Victoria moved closer, and Serafina caught the scent of expensive perfume. Did he marry you for love, sweetheart? Did he sweep you off your feet with romantic gestures and declarations of devotion? Or was there a contract involved? Serafina's face must have given her away, because Victoria's smile turned triumphant. I thought so. A business arrangement, just like everything else in his life. The question is, what did your family need badly enough to sell their daughter? It's not like that, Serafina protested, but even as she said it, she knew how hollow it sounded. Isn't it? Victoria pulled out her phone. Dante always answers when I call. Shall we see what he has to say about his new wife? Before Serafina could stop her, Victoria had dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Victoria. Dante's voice came through the speaker, and just hearing it made Serafina's chest tight with unexpected longing. This isn't a good time. I'm at your penthouse, darling, Victoria purred. Imagine my surprise when I met your wife. Were you planning to mention that little detail? There was a pause that stretched too long. We'll discuss this when I get back. Will we? Because I have to say, I'm feeling rather betrayed. All those conversations about how marriage was for fools and weaklings, and here you are, playing house with some child. Victoria. There was warning in his voice now. Drop it. She's 19, Dante. 19. Even for you, this is... The line went dead. Victoria stared at the phone for a moment, then looked up at Serafina with something that might have been pity. He hung up on me, she said wonderingly. In 8 years, Dante has never hung up on me. Serafina didn't know what to say to that. She felt like she'd witnessed something private and painful, the destruction of a relationship that had clearly meant something to both Victoria and Dante. I should go, Victoria said after a moment. She moved toward the elevator, then paused. A word of advice from one woman to another: don't fall in love with him. Dante Blackthorne is brilliant and powerful and incredibly attractive, but he doesn't know how to love anything that isn't a quarterly profit report. He'll use you up and throw you away, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you did wrong. Maybe, Serafina said quietly, or maybe you just didn't know how to reach him. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Good luck with that, sweetheart. You're going to need it. After she left, Serafina stood alone in the enormous penthouse, Victoria's words echoing in her head. She'd learned more about her husband in the last hour than she had in the 3 days since their wedding, but none of it made her feel better. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Don't let Victoria get in your head. She's not as close to Dante as she thinks. Elena. The housekeeper had obviously overheard at least part of the conversation. Serafina typed back. How much of what she said was true? The response came quickly, some of it, but not all. Give him a chance to surprise you. That night, Serafina lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Victoria's revelations. Dante took his coffee black because adding anything felt like weakness. He had nightmares about his father. He'd never said, "I love you" to anyone. She thought about the way he'd hung up on Victoria, a woman he'd apparently been involved with for years. Was it because he was angry at being caught in his deception, or because he was protecting something? Her phone chimed with an email notification. Another message from Dante sent from Singapore. Serafina. I heard Victoria stopped by. I apologize for any discomfort she may have caused. She won't be a problem going forward. I'll be home tomorrow evening. We need to talk. Dome. He'd called the penthouse home, not the penthouse or my place. It was a small thing, but it made something warm unfurl in her chest. She started to type a response, then stopped. If Dante wanted to talk, she had some things to say too, starting with the fact that their marriage might be a business arrangement. But she wasn't about to be treated like a dirty secret or a temporary inconvenience. For the first time since their wedding, Serafina found herself looking forward to seeing her husband again, even if it was only to tell him exactly what she thought of his handling of their situation. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Dante arrived home the next evening like a storm front moving in, all tension and barely controlled energy. Serafina heard the elevator ding and felt her stomach flip with nervousness. She'd been rehearsing what she wanted to say all day, but now that the moment was here, her carefully planned speech evaporated. He appeared in the living room, doorway still wearing his travel clothes, expensive jeans and a button-down shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous than his usual suits. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and there were shadows under his gray eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Serafina. His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the way his gaze swept over her, cataloging her presence like he was reassuring himself she was real. Welcome home, she said, proud that her voice was steady. How was Singapore? Productive. He moved into the room but kept his distance, like she was something that might bite. We need to discuss Victoria's visit. Yes, we do. Serafina stood up, squaring her shoulders. But first, we need to discuss why whatever she is to you, knew nothing about your marriage. Something flickered in his expression. Victoria was a friend with benefits. Nothing more. For 8 years. Duration doesn't imply emotional attachment, he said. But there was a defensive edge to his voice that suggested otherwise. She seemed to think it did. Serafina crossed her arms. She also seemed to think she had more claim to this penthouse than your actual wife. Dante ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. I should have told her about our arrangement before I left, he admitted. That was an oversight on my part. Arrangement, Serafina repeated. Is that what you're calling our marriage? That's what it is, he said, but he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Then why did you hang up on her when she called? The question came out before Serafina could stop herself. If this is just business, why did hearing her insult me make you angry enough to end an 8-year relationship? Dante went very still, and Serafina realized she'd hit on something important. How do you know I was angry? He asked quietly. Because I know what your voice sounds like when you're trying to control yourself, she said, surprised by her own boldness. You use that same tone when you're talking about the contract. He stared at her for a long moment, and she had the strangest feeling he was seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time since their wedding. Victoria overstepped, he said finally. This is your home now. She had no right to make you uncomfortable. Your home. The word sent a flutter through her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. Is it? My home? She gestured around the opulent living room, because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like I'm a guest who's overstayed her welcome. You disappeared the morning after our wedding without a word except a note. You've been gone for 4 days, and now you come back talking about arrangements and discussing terms, like I'm a business deal instead of your wife. You are my wife, Dante said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify. Legally, at least. Then act like it. The words burst out of her with more force than she'd intended. I gave up my life for this marriage. I moved into your home, took your name, and agreed to play the dutiful wife for the next 5 years. The least you can do is treat me like a human being instead of a piece of property." Dante's composure cracked, and for a moment she saw something raw in his expression. Surprise, maybe even admiration. "You're not property," he said quietly. "You're what?" "A means to an end? A convenient solution to your expansion problems?" "Complicated," he finished, and the word hung between them like a challenge. "How am I complicated?" "I signed your contract. I married you in front of witnesses. I've stayed out of your way and made no demands. I'm probably the least complicated wife in the history of marriage." Dante moved closer, and Serafina caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him that made her pulse quicken. "You're complicated," he said, "because you were supposed to be a simple business transaction, a problem solved with paperwork and legal formalities. You weren't supposed to call me out on my behavior or defend yourself against Victoria, or look at me like I'm capable of being more than I am." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Serafina stared at him, seeing cracks in his carefully constructed armor. "Maybe the problem isn't that I'm complicated," she said softly. "Maybe the problem is that you've spent so long treating everything like business that you've forgotten how to be human." Something shifted in his face, a flicker of vulnerability so quick she almost missed it. "Being human gets you hurt," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her chest ache. "Being human makes you weak. Who told you that?" He turned away, moving toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "My father, every day for the first 18 years of my life." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. She thought about Victoria's revelation that Dante had nightmares about his father, and suddenly understood why he kept everyone at arm's length. "He was wrong," she said. Quietly, Dante's shoulders tensed. "Was he? Look around, Serafina. Everything I've built, I built by being ruthless, by cutting emotions out of the equation. The moment I let feelings cloud my judgment, you'll what? Fail? Fall apart? Become human like the rest of us?" He turned back to face her, and she was startled by the intensity in his gray eyes. "I'll become my father," he said simply. The words hit her like ice water. Victoria had been right about one thing. There were depths to Dante Blackthorne that she'd never imagined. Pain and fear carefully buried under layers of control and success. "You're not your father," Serafina said, stepping closer. "You married me to save my family's business. You could have destroyed us completely and taken what you wanted anyway. But you didn't. You gave us a way out that preserved our dignity and our livelihood. That's not ruthless. That's compassionate." "It was practical," he said, but there was less conviction in his voice. "Was it? Because I think there are a lot of practical ways you could have acquired my father's company that didn't involve marriage. I think you chose the one option that helped us because, despite what you tell yourself, you're not as cold as you pretend to be." Dante stared at her, and she could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the part of him that wanted to believe her fighting against years of conditioning. "You don't know me," he said finally. "No, I don't, but I'd like to." She took another step closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "We're stuck with each other for 5 years. Dante, we can spend that time as strangers living in the same house, or we can try to build something real." "Real," he repeated, like the word was foreign. "Real," she confirmed. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to like me, but I'm asking you to see me, to talk to me, to treat me like your partner in this arrangement instead of an inconvenient complication." He was quiet for so long that she started to think he wouldn't respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to share my space or my life with someone else. I've been alone for so long that—" "Then we'll figure it out together," Serafina interrupted. "But first we need to address the elephant in the room." Dante's eyebrows rose in question. "The contract," she said, heat flooding her cheeks. "The consummation clause. It's been 4 days and you think I've been avoiding it." His voice was unreadable. "Haven't you?" He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. There was something different in his expression now, an intensity that made her breath catch. "I haven't been avoiding it." he said quietly. "I've been giving you time to change your mind." Change my mind? You're 19 years old, Serafina. You should be dating college boys and figuring out who you are, not tied to a man who doesn't know how to be anything but cold and calculating. His hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself. You deserve better than a marriage of convenience with someone like me. The confession was so raw, so unexpected, that it took her breath away. This wasn't the cold CEO who'd presented her with a contract. This was a man who was genuinely concerned about her well-being, even if it meant complicating his own plans. "What if I don't want better?" she asked softly. "What if I want you?" Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, desire, hope, all quickly suppressed. "You don't know what you're saying, don't I?" She reached up, her fingers barely brushing his jaw. He went absolutely still at the contact, like she'd touched a live wire. "I may be 19, but I'm not a child. I know what I agreed to when I signed that contract, and I know that the way you're looking at me right now has nothing to do with business arrangements." Serafina. Her name was a warning, but he didn't pull away from her touch. "We're married," she said simply. "We're going to be married for 5 years. We can spend that time pretending we don't affect each other, or we can be honest about what's happening between us." And what's happening between us? His voice was rough, like the words were being dragged out of him. "You tell me." She let her hand drift down to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under her palm. "You're the one who hung up on Victoria when she insulted me. You're the one who called this place home. You're the one who's been staring at me like you want to devour me since you walked through that door." Dante caught her wrist, his fingers wrapping around it like a manacle. For a moment, she thought he was going to push her away, but instead he held her hand against his chest. "You have no idea what you do to me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then show me." The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an invitation. Dante stared at her, and she could see the moment he stopped fighting against whatever was building between them. "If we do this," he said carefully, "if we cross this line, there's no going back. We won't just be business partners playing house. We'll be, what? Husband and wife?" Serafina smiled, and she was surprised by how brave she felt. "That's what we already are, Dante. The only question is whether we're going to act like it." He studied her face like he was memorizing it, his thumb tracing across her wrist where her pulse was racing. "You're sure?" Instead of answering with words, Serafina rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was meant to be gentle, a soft press of lips to seal their new understanding. But the moment their mouths touched, something ignited. Dante's control snapped, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. His free hand tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and she melted against him with a soft sound of surrender. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Serafina," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice now. Reverent, almost wondering. "I know," she whispered, because she could see everything he wasn't saying in his eyes. The fear, the desire, the desperate hope that maybe this could be something real. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't." She cupped his face in her hands, surprised by her own boldness. "Don't overthink this. Don't turn it into another business calculation. Just be here with me." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man dying of thirst. "I don't know how to be gentle," he confessed. "I don't need gentle," she said softly. "I need real. I need you." When he opened his eyes, the last of his walls had crumbled. What she saw there made her heart race. Desire, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked dangerously close to love, even if he wasn't ready to name it yet. "Come to bed with me," she whispered. Dante didn't answer with words. Instead, he swept her up in his arms, carrying her toward the master bedroom she'd never seen, and for the first time since their wedding, Serafina felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 6. After the Storm. Serafina woke to unfamiliar surroundings and the warm weight of an arm across her waist. Dante's bedroom was a study in masculine elegance, all dark wood and rich fabrics, with floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed the city spread out below like a glittering carpet. But it wasn't the opulent room that made her breath catch. It was the way Dante was looking at her in the early morning light, like she was something precious he was afraid might disappear. "Good morning, wife," he said softly, and the word sounded different than it had before. Warmer, real. "Good morning, husband." She turned in his arms, marveling at how different he looked with his hair tousled and his guard down. Younger, less forbidding, almost vulnerable. "How do you feel?" There was concern in his voice, and she realized he was genuinely worried about her well-being. "Like everything just changed," she admitted. Something flickered across his expression. "Regrets?" "None." She traced a finger along his jaw, fascinated by the way he leaned into her touch. "You?" "I should have regrets," he said quietly. "I should be calculating the ways this complicates our arrangement. But all I can think about is how much I want to keep you in this bed for the rest of the day." Heat pooled in her stomach at the rough honesty in his voice. "What's stopping you?" "Reality," he said with a rueful smile. "I have a conference call with Tokyo in an hour, and you probably want to shower and eat something." "Practical as always," she teased. But she was touched by his consideration. Old habits. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, and the gentle gesture made her chest ache with unexpected tenderness. "But Serafina, what happened between us last night, it doesn't change the fundamental terms of our contract." 5 years and then we'll see what happens," she interrupted. "I'm not asking you to rewrite our entire agreement based on one night, Dante. But I am asking you not to pretend it didn't happen." Relief flickered across his features. "I couldn't pretend that even if I wanted to." They lay in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Serafina found herself studying the man who was now her husband in more than just name. There were scars she hadn't noticed before, a thin line along his ribs, another on his shoulder. Evidence of a life that hadn't been as privileged as it appeared. "Tell me about your father," she said impulsively. Dante went rigid. "Why?" "Because you mentioned him yesterday, and I get the feeling he's the reason you think being human makes you weak." "It's not important." "It is to me." She propped herself up on her elbow, meeting his guarded gaze. "You know everything about my family, my situation, why I married you. But I don't know anything about what made you who you are." Dante was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Marcus Blackthorne was a brilliant businessman and a terrible father," he said. "He built Blackthorne Industries from nothing, and he made sure I understood that success required sacrifice. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was liability. Love was a luxury that poor people couldn't afford. And your mother? Left when I was 8. The words were clipped, matter of fact, but she caught the flash of old pain in his eyes. She said she couldn't watch him destroy another generation. Serafina's heart ached for the little boy he'd been, abandoned by one parent, emotionally brutalized by the other. "I'm sorry. Don't be." Dante's mask was sliding back into place. "It made me stronger, more focused. Everything I've achieved, I achieved because I learned not to let feelings cloud my judgment. Or maybe you achieved it despite what he did to you," Serafina said softly. "Maybe you succeeded because you're naturally brilliant and driven, not because he beat the humanity out of you." Dante stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "You don't understand," he said finally. "The business world is ruthless. One moment of weakness, one emotional decision, and everything you've built can crumble. I've seen it happen." "I've also seen what happens when people have no one to ground them," Serafina countered. "They become so focused on winning that they forget why they wanted to win in the first place. They end up successful and completely alone." "Like me, you mean?" "Like you were," she corrected. "But you're not alone anymore." Something shifted in his expression, hope and fear warring in his gray eyes. "For 5 years," he said quietly. "Maybe longer, if we're both lucky." The words hung between them, full of possibility and promise. Dante reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be married to someone I actually..." He stopped, as if the words were too dangerous to say out loud. Someone you actually what? Care about, he finished, and the admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Serafina's heart did a strange little flip. It wasn't a declaration of love, but for a man who'd spent 31 years avoiding emotional attachments, it was everything. Then we'll figure it out together, she said, echoing her words from the night before, one day at a time. Dante's phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the intimate moment. He glanced at it with a grimace. Tokyo, he said apologetically. Go, Serafina said, pressing a quick kiss to his lips. I'll see you tonight? Yes. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Serafina, last night, thank you for pushing, for not letting me hide behind the contract. After he left, Serafina lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had changed in the span of 12 hours. She'd gone from being a stranger in her own marriage to something much more complicated. A wife who was falling for her husband, even though their relationship had an expiration date. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Details. Now. Don't leave anything out. Serafina stared at the message, not sure how to explain that her fake marriage had suddenly become very real, at least emotionally. That the cold, calculating businessman she'd married was actually a wounded man who'd been taught that love was weakness. It's complicated, she texted back. All the best relationships are. The question is, do you love him? Serafina stared at the question for a long time before turning off her phone without answering. Because the truth was too terrifying to admit, even to herself. She was falling in love with Dante Blackthorne, and she had no idea if he was capable of loving her back. Chapter 7. Unraveling. 2 weeks into their new dynamic, Serafina was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make their unusual marriage work. Dante still left for the office before dawn and returned after dark, but now their evenings together felt like actual conversations, instead of polite stranger small talk. He'd started asking about her day, sharing details about his business deals, and occasionally letting slip glimpses of the man beneath the CEO facade. The physical intimacy had been a revelation. In bed, Dante's careful control gave way to something raw and passionate that left them both breathless. But it was the quiet moments that affected Serafina most. The way he traced patterns on her skin as she fell asleep. The coffee he brought her every morning before he left for work. The way he actually smiled now when he looked at her. She was starting to hope that their 5-year contract might become something permanent when everything fell apart. Mrs. Blackthorne? Elena appeared in the doorway of the living room, where Serafina was curled up with a book. There's someone here to see you. The man who followed Elena into the room was everything Dante wasn't. Soft, where Dante was sharp. Warm, where Dante was controlled. Approachable, where Dante was intimidating. He was probably in his 50s, with silver gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Blackthorne, he said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. James Whitmore. I was hoping we could have a conversation about your husband. Warning bells went off in Serafina's head. I'm sorry, who are you exactly? I'm a psychiatrist, Dr. Whitmore said gently. I've been treating Dante for the past 3 years. The words hit her like a physical blow. Dante was in therapy? Why hadn't he mentioned that? I think there's been some mistake, Serafina said carefully. Dante has never mentioned you. That doesn't surprise me. Dante is resistant to discussing his treatment, even with those closest to him. Dr. Whitmore settled into one of the expensive armchairs without invitation. May I be frank with you, Mrs. Blackthorne? I'd prefer it if you left, Serafina said, but her curiosity was stronger than her caution. I don't think Dante would appreciate you discussing his private medical information with me. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. But I'm concerned that Dante's recent behavior suggests he's having a significant episode. Episode of what? Dr. Whitmore studied her with those kind, professional eyes. Has Dante told you anything about his diagnosis? His what? The question came out as barely a whisper. I see. Dr. Whitmore's expression grew troubled. Mrs. Blackthorne, Your husband suffers from severe attachment disorder stemming from childhood trauma. He also exhibits symptoms consistent with antisocial personality disorder, what most people would call sociopathy. The world tilted on its axis. Serafina felt like she couldn't breathe. "That's not possible," she said weakly. "Dante isn't. He's not a sociopath. He's complicated, yes, but he's not dangerous. Cold? Manipulative?" Dr. Whitmore's voice was gentle but relentless. "Mrs. Blackthorne, when did you and Dante meet?" 6 weeks ago, Serafina admitted. "And you were married how quickly after that?" 3 weeks. She was starting to see where this was going, and she didn't like it. Doesn't that strike you as unusual? Most people take months or years to get to know someone before making such a significant commitment. "It was a business arrangement," Serafina said, but the words felt hollow. Was it? Or was it something more calculated than that? Dr. Whitmore leaned forward. "Tell me, Mrs. Blackthorne, what did your family need that Dante could provide?" "How do you—" She stopped, realizing she was giving him exactly the confirmation he was looking for. "Dante is brilliant at identifying people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them," Dr. Whitmore continued. "It's one of the hallmarks of his condition. He doesn't form genuine emotional attachments. He forms strategic alliances that serve his purposes. You're wrong." But even as she said it, doubts were creeping in. Had everything between them been manipulation? The way he'd seemed vulnerable when talking about his father, the gentleness after their first night together, the way he'd started letting her into his life. Had it all been calculated? "I understand this is difficult to hear," Dr. Whitmore said kindly. "Sociopaths are often extremely charming. They're excellent at mimicking normal emotional responses when it serves their goals. The fact that you've developed feelings for him doesn't mean those feelings are reciprocated in any genuine way." Serafina's phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, she glanced at it and felt her world crumble a little more. The message was from an unknown number. "Check your email. You deserve to know the truth about your husband." With shaking hands, she opened her email app. The message contained a series of attached documents, medical records, therapy session notes, and what looked like a psychological evaluation. "I see you've received Dr. Martinez's files," Dr. Whitmore said quietly. "Who?" "Dante's previous therapist. She was concerned about his recent marriage, particularly given that his new wife fits a very specific psychological profile." Against her better judgment, Serafina opened the first document. The words swam on the screen, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Subject exhibits classic signs of antisocial personality disorder. Incapable of forming genuine emotional attachments. Uses charm and manipulation to achieve desired outcomes. Recommended continued monitoring due to risk of harmful behavior toward others. "This can't be real," she whispered. "I'm afraid it is." "Mrs. Blackthorne, I need you to understand that you may be in danger. Dante's condition makes him unpredictable, especially when his carefully constructed plans are threatened." "Threatened by what?" "By the possibility that you might discover the truth about why he really married you." Before Serafina could ask what he meant, she heard the elevator ding. Dante's voice carried from the entryway. He was home early. Dr. Whitmore stood up quickly. "I should go. But please, Mrs. Blackthorne, think carefully about everything I've told you. And if you ever feel unsafe, call me." He pressed a business card into her hand just as Dante appeared in the doorway. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante's expression was perfectly controlled, but there was something lethal in his gray eyes as he looked between Serafina and Dr. Whitmore. "James," he said pleasantly. "What an unexpected surprise." "Dante." Dr. Whitmore's voice was steady, but Serafina noticed he took a step back. "I was just having a conversation with your lovely wife." "Were you?" Dante moved into the room with that predatory grace she'd noticed the first day they met. Suddenly it didn't seem attractive. It seemed threatening. "About what?" "Your treatment, primarily. I was concerned that Mrs. Blackthorne might not be fully aware of your situation." "My situation." Dante's voice was deadly quiet. "And what situation would that be exactly?" Dr. Whitmore glanced at Serafina, and she saw something that looked like pity in his expression. "I think you know." he said simply. Dante turned to Serafina, and for a moment, his mask slipped. What she saw underneath made her blood run cold. Not the vulnerability she'd thought she was glimpsing these past 2 weeks, but something calculating and empty. "I see you've been reading," he said, noticing the phone still clutched in her hand. "Find anything interesting?" "Dante," she started, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't lie to me and don't make excuses. If you have questions, ask them." Dr. Whitmore headed for the elevator. "I'll leave you two to discuss this privately. But remember what I said, Mrs. Blackthorne." After he left, the silence stretched between them like a live wire. Serafina stared at the man she'd thought she was falling in love with, trying to reconcile the tender husband of the past 2 weeks with the cold stranger standing in front of her now. "Is it true?" she asked finally. "Which part?" "Any of it. All of it. The diagnosis, the manipulation, the fact that I'm a sociopath who married you as part of some elaborate psychological game?" Dante's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "What do you think, wife?" The way he said wife, like it was a joke they'd both been in on, made her stomach turn. "I think you're scaring me," she admitted. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise. Maybe even hurt, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Good," he said simply. "Maybe now we can have an honest conversation about what this marriage really is." Chapter 8. The Truth Unveiled. "Sit down, Serafina." Dante's voice was utterly calm, which somehow made everything more terrifying. She remained standing, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I think I'll stay right here." "Suit yourself." He moved to the bar cart and poured himself a scotch, his movements precise and controlled. "I suppose you want explanations." "I want the truth. The truth." He took a sip of his drink, and when he looked at her again, his gray eyes were unreadable. "The truth is that Dr. Whitmore is a hack who lost his license 3 years ago for having inappropriate relationships with his patients. The truth is that those medical files are forgeries designed to make you question everything about our marriage. And the truth is that someone is playing a very dangerous game with both of our lives." Serafina blinked, feeling like she'd been slapped. "What? Did you really think I was so stupid that I wouldn't notice when my wife was being targeted?" Dante set down his glass and pulled out his phone. James Whitmore, formerly Dr. James Whitmore, lost his psychiatric license in 2022 after being convicted of fraud and patient exploitation. He's been working as a freelance, let's call him a consultant, for people who want to discredit others using fake psychological profiles. He held up his phone, showing her what looked like a news article about Dr. Whitmore's conviction. But the medical files were created by someone with access to professional letterhead and a very specific understanding of psychiatric terminology. Dante moved closer, and Serafina had to resist the urge to back away. "The question is, who hired him? Who wants to convince you that your husband is a dangerous sociopath?" Serafina's mind was reeling. "You're saying this was all fake? The visit, the files, the dire warnings about my mental health, all of it." Dante's expression was still unreadable, though I have to admit it was well executed. Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly which buttons to push. But why would someone... She stopped, understanding hitting her like a freight train. Victoria, Dante confirmed. "Though I suspect she had help. This level of manipulation requires resources and connections she doesn't have on her own." Relief and anger warred in Serafina's chest. Relief that the man she'd been falling for wasn't actually a calculating sociopath. Anger that someone had tried to destroy her marriage with such elaborate lies. "So you're not... you don't have antisocial personality disorder?" "No." Dante's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement, though I can see how someone might draw that conclusion based on my general disposition. "This isn't funny," Serafina snapped. "I spent the last hour thinking my husband was a dangerous manipulator who'd been playing me from day one." "And how did that make you feel?" The question was asked so quietly, so carefully, that Serafina realized there was something important hiding behind it. "Terrified," she admitted, "and heartbroken. Because even if you had been manipulating me, what I felt for you was real. Something shifted in Dante's expression. The first genuine emotion she'd seen since he'd walked through the door. "What you felt," he repeated. Serafina took a shaky breath. She was tired of games. Tired of holding back. Tired of pretending that what was happening between them was purely physical. "I'm falling in love with you," she said simply, which is probably the stupidest thing I could admit to a man who married me for business reasons and has made it clear our arrangement has an expiration date. But there it is. Dante went absolutely still. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the city beyond the windows. "Serafina," he said finally, and there was something raw in his voice. "I know," she said quickly. "I know this complicates everything. I know you didn't sign up for actual feelings. I know—" "You know nothing," Dante interrupted, moving across the room so fast that she barely had time to blink before he was standing in front of her. "You think I married you purely for business reasons? Didn't you?" I told myself I did. His hands came up to frame her face, and she could see something desperate in his eyes. I told myself it was the most practical solution to a complex problem. I told myself that marriage to a 19-year-old girl I barely knew was just another contract negotiation. And now? Now I know I was lying to myself. His thumbs traced across her cheekbones with infinite gentleness. "I could have acquired your father's business a dozen different ways, Serafina. Hostile takeover, aggressive buyout, strategic partnership. Any of them would have been simpler than marriage. Then why? Because the moment I saw you sitting in that conference room, looking terrified but trying so hard to be brave, something inside me shifted. You were 19 years old and willing to sacrifice your entire future to save your family. You were everything I'd convinced myself didn't exist. Pure, selfless, genuine." Serafina's heart was hammering against her ribs. "Dante, I married you because I wanted to protect you," he continued, the words coming out like a confession. "From your father's debts, from whatever predatory businessman might have come along next, from the world that would have eaten you alive. I told myself it was temporary, that I could keep my distance, that I could honor the contract without getting emotionally involved. What changed? You did." He rested his forehead against hers. "Every day you did something that chipped away at my defenses. You called me out when I was being cold. You defended our marriage to Victoria. You pushed me to be better than I thought I was capable of being. And somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending this was just business." The confession hung between them, raw and beautiful and terrifying. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you," Dante said simply. "I'm saying that whoever tried to destroy our marriage today failed because what I feel for you is real. I'm saying that the idea of you believing I was incapable of genuine emotion made me want to burn down the entire city to prove them wrong." Serafina stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. But the contract, the 5-year limit, can be amended. Dante's smile was soft, transformative. "If my wife is willing to renegotiate terms." "What kind of terms?" "Permanent," he said without hesitation. "Exclusive. Based on love instead of business necessity." Serafina felt tears prick her eyes. "I think I can agree to those terms." When Dante kissed her, it was nothing like their previous kisses, desperate or passionate or hungry. This was tender, reverent, full of promise. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," he replied, and the words sounded like a revelation. "But we still have a problem. Victoria. Victoria," he confirmed grimly. "And whoever she's working with. This attack on our marriage was sophisticated, well-funded, and designed to destroy us psychologically." That means his phone buzzed with an incoming call. When he glanced at the screen, his expression darkened. "Who is it?" Serafina asked. "My father," Dante said quietly, calling from a prison phone. The words hit her like ice water. Marcus Blackthorne was supposed to be dead, at least. That's what everyone believed. "Answer it," she said. Dante hesitated, then swiped to accept the call. "Hello, son," came a voice she'd never heard but somehow recognized. Cold, calculating, utterly without warmth. "I hear congratulations are in order. Though I have to say, your choice in wives is interesting." Serafina could hear the smile in the man's voice, and it made her skin crawl. "What do you want, Marcus?" Dante's voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Just to meet my new daughter-in-law," Marcus Blackthorne replied. "I think it's time we had a family reunion, don't you?" Chapter 9. Ghosts and Revelations. The revelation that Dante's father was alive sent shockwaves through everything Serafina thought she knew about her husband's past. They sat in Dante's home office, a secure room lined with monitors and communication equipment that looked more like a war room than a workspace. "He's been in federal prison for the past 15 years, Dante explained, his voice carefully controlled. "Embezzlement, fraud, racketeering. They finally caught up with him when I was 18. But everyone thinks he's dead. Because I wanted them to." Dante's fingers drummed against his desk, a rare display of nervousness. "When he went to prison, I changed the corporate records, issued a death certificate, held a funeral. As far as the world is concerned, Marcus Blackthorne died in a car accident in 2009. Why? Because the Blackthorne name needed to survive his crimes. The company, the employees, the legacy, it all would have crumbled if people knew the truth." Dante looked up at her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I was 18 years old, Serafina. I had a choice. Let his sins destroy everything he'd built, or bury them so deep that they couldn't hurt anyone else. So you've been living with this secret for 15 years. 15 years of building something clean from something corrupt. 15 years of proving that the Blackthorne name could stand for more than lies and manipulation." His laugh was bitter. "I should have known he'd find a way to destroy it all anyway." "What does he want?" Before Dante could answer, his phone rang again. This time he put it on speaker. "Missing me already?" Marcus Blackthorne's voice filled the room, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "What do you want?" Dante repeated, straight to business. "I raised you well." There was genuine pride in the man's voice, which somehow made it worse. "I want what I've always wanted, son, to see you reach your full potential. My full potential doesn't involve you, doesn't it? Tell me, how is married life treating you? I have to say, I was surprised to hear you'd taken such a young bride, though I suppose there are advantages to shaping someone from such an early age." Serafina felt sick. The way he spoke about her, about their marriage, made her skin crawl. "Leave her out of this," Dante said quietly, and there was steel in his voice. "But she's the whole point, isn't she? Beautiful, intelligent, just naive enough to believe in fairy tale endings. The perfect weapon. Weapon for what? For proving that you really are my son." Marcus's voice turned cold. "You've spent 15 years pretending to be better than me, building your little empire on ethical business practices and corporate responsibility. But we both know the truth. You're exactly like me. The only difference is that you're better at hiding it. I'm nothing like you, aren't you? You manipulated that girl's family into debt, then swooped in with a marriage proposal they couldn't refuse. You isolated her from her support system, installed her in your penthouse like a pretty trophy, and convinced her she was in love with you. If that's not manipulation, what is?" Dante's face had gone white. "That's not what happened, isn't it? Let's see." Vale Textiles was struggling but not failing until someone started sabotaging their supply chain. Someone with connections, resources, and a very specific interest in acquiring their business. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check your wife's expression, son. I think she's starting to connect the dots." Serafina stared at Dante, her mind racing. Her family's business had been struggling for months before Dante appeared with his offer. Their suppliers had canceled contracts, their biggest clients had walked away, their bank had called in loans, all within a 6-week period. "It's not true," Dante said, looking at her desperately. "Serafina, whatever he's implying, it's not true." But she was remembering things now, small details that hadn't made sense at the time. The way Dante had known exactly how much debt they were in, the way his offer had been so perfectly structured to solve all their problems, the way he'd had a marriage contract ready before their first meeting. "Did you engineer my family's financial crisis?" she asked quietly. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Dante's face was a mask of anguish, and in that moment, Serafina knew the answer before he spoke. Yes, he whispered. The single word hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the wall to steady herself. Excellent. Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker with genuine delight. Finally, some honesty. Though I have to say, son, your execution was flawless. The way you systematically dismantled their business relationships, the perfectly timed loan recalls, the supply chain disruptions, it was artistry. Shut up, Dante snarled. But his eyes never left Serafina's face. Why? She whispered. Why would you destroy my family just to... Because I wanted you, Dante said, the words torn from him like a confession under torture. Because from the moment I saw you at that charity gala 6 months ago, I couldn't get you out of my head. Because you were everything pure and good in a world that had taught me those things didn't exist. So you decided to take me? I decided to save you. Dante moved toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. Your family's business was already failing, Serafina. They were drowning in debt, making terrible decisions, headed for bankruptcy within a year. I just accelerated the timeline. You manipulated us. You made us desperate so we'd have no choice but to accept your offer. I gave you a way out that preserved your family's dignity and secured their future, Dante said desperately. I could have let them lose everything and bought the company from the bankruptcy court for pennies on the dollar. Instead, I made sure your parents kept their home, their savings, their pride, while taking their daughter as payment. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Dante flinched as if she'd struck him. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said quietly. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. But you did engineer it. All of it. The crisis, the marriage proposal, the contract. Everything was designed to trap me. To protect you, Dante corrected, but his voice lacked conviction. From what? A normal life? The chance to choose my own future? From a world that would have used you up and thrown you away? Dante's control finally snapped. You were 19 years old, Serafina. Beautiful, trusting, completely unprepared for the kind of predators who circle failing businesses looking for opportunities. If not me, it would have been someone else. Someone who wouldn't have cared about your well-being or your family's future, so you decided to be my savior, whether I wanted one or not. I decided to be the lesser evil. Marcus's laughter filled the room, cold and triumphant. Oh, this is perfect. Son, you've exceeded even my expectations. The girl actually believed you were different from me. I am different from you, Dante said. But the words sounded hollow now. Are you? You identified a target, analyzed her weaknesses, created a crisis to exploit, and then positioned yourself as the solution to a problem you created. That's textbook manipulation, boy. I couldn't have done it better myself. Serafina felt like she was drowning. Everything she'd believed about their relationship, about Dante's feelings for her, about their future together. All of it was built on lies. The worst part, she said quietly, is that I actually believed you loved me. Something flickered across Dante's face, pain so raw it was almost physical. I do love you, he said desperately. What I feel for you is real, even if how we got here was what? Calculated? Manipulative? Exactly like something your father would do? The comparison hit its mark. Dante recoiled as if she'd slapped him. I'm not him, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Aren't you? Serafina was surprised by how calm she sounded when everything inside her was screaming. You saw something you wanted and you took it, regardless of the cost to anyone else. You destroyed my family's livelihood to create a situation where I had no choice but to marry you. How is that different from what he did to your mother? Dante went absolutely still. What? She left when you were 8, right? Because she couldn't watch him destroy another generation? Serafina felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. Maybe she wasn't abandoning you, Dante. Maybe she was trying to save you from becoming exactly what you've become. The words hit their target with devastating accuracy. Dante's face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the 8-year-old boy whose mother had walked away rather than watch him turn into his father. Brilliant. Marcus's voice cut through the moment like a blade. The girl has a spine after all. Though I have to say, sweetheart, you're being rather ungrateful. My son gave you a life most women would kill for. Luxury, security, social status. All he asked in return was your complete surrender. Stop, Dante said, but his voice was broken. Why should I? This is the moment I've been waiting for. The moment you finally admit what you really are. What we both are. I'm not you, Dante repeated, but it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Then prove it, Marcus challenged. Let her go. Dissolve the marriage, give her family their business back, and walk away. If you're really different from me, if you really love her more than you love possessing her, then set her free. The challenge hung in the air between them. Serafina found herself holding her breath, waiting to see what Dante would choose. I can't, he whispered finally. Can't or won't? Marcus asked with obvious delight. Dante looked at Serafina, and she saw the truth in his eyes, love and obsession twisted together until they were indistinguishable. Both, he admitted. I can't let you go, and I won't pretend it's for your own good. I want you, Serafina. I want you more than I've ever wanted anything, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you. The naked honesty was somehow worse than the lies. At least when she'd thought their marriage was based on business necessity, there had been hope for something real to grow between them. But this was possession disguised as love, control disguised as protection. Then you really are your father's son, she said quietly. The words broke something in Dante's expression. He staggered backward like she'd physically struck him. Serafina, please. No. She was surprised by how strong her voice sounded. I need to leave. I need to think. You're not going anywhere, Dante said, and there was something dangerous in his voice now, something that reminded her uncomfortably of Marcus's cold control. Are you going to stop me? If I have to. The threat hung between them, and Serafina realized she was seeing the real Dante Blackthorne for the first time. Not the wounded man she'd thought she was healing, not the cold businessman she'd originally met, but something darker, something that had learned to take what it wanted regardless of the cost. There's my boy, Marcus said softly. Now you're being honest. Serafina moved toward the door, and Dante stepped into her path. Don't, he said quietly. Don't make me choose between letting you leave and keeping you safe. Safe from what? From the world. From other predators. From yourself. His gray eyes were wild now, desperate. You don't understand how dangerous it is out there for someone like you. How easily you could be hurt, used, destroyed. Like you hurt me. Like you used me. I would never hurt you. You already have. Serafina looked at the man she'd thought she loved, and all she saw was a beautiful cage. The difference is that you've convinced yourself it was for my own good. She pushed past him toward the door, and for a moment she thought he might physically stop her. But at the last second he stepped aside. This conversation isn't over, he called after her. Yes, it is, she replied without turning around. As she walked toward the elevator, Marcus's voice followed her from the office. Don't worry, son. She'll be back. They always come back, and when she does, she'll be grateful for the lesson in how dangerous the world really is. The elevator doors closed on Dante's anguished shout of denial, but Serafina had already heard enough. She'd married a man who'd claimed to be saving her, only to discover he was the very thing she needed saving from. And the worst part was, she still loved him. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Serafina spent the night at a hotel, her phone buzzing constantly with calls and messages from Dante that she refused to answer. Every text was a variation on the same theme: explanations, justifications, promises that he could make this right if she would just come home and listen. But she was done listening. She was done making excuses for a man who'd orchestrated her family's downfall just to possess her. The next morning, she called her parents. Serafina, sweetheart. Her mother's voice was warm with relief. We were worried when we couldn't reach you yesterday. How are you settling in with married life? The question hit like a knife to the chest. Her parents had been so grateful for Dante's generosity, so relieved that their daughter had found a man who could provide for her and secure their family's future. How could she tell them it was all built on lies? Mom, she said carefully, I need to ask you something about the business problems you had before Dante's offer. Oh, sweetheart, why bring up those dark days? That's all behind us now, thanks to your husband. Please, it's important, her mother sighed. Well, it started about 6 months before Dante appeared. Our biggest clients began canceling contracts. Meridian Corp, Stellar Industries, Phoenix Holdings. They all cited budget constraints or strategic restructuring, but it happened so quickly. Serafina's heart sank. She recognized those company names. They were all subsidiaries of Blackthorn Industries. And then our suppliers started demanding immediate payment instead of our usual 30-day terms. Her father's voice joined the conversation. The bank called in our loans. Our credit lines were frozen. It was like dominoes falling one after another. Did you ever suspect that someone might be deliberately sabotaging you? What? No, of course not. Who would do such a thing? Someone who wanted to buy your company at a discount, Serafina said quietly. Serafina Rose Vale, her mother said sharply. What are you implying? Before she could answer, there was a knock at her hotel room door. Her blood ran cold. Somehow she knew exactly who it was. I have to go, she told her parents. I'll call you later. The knocking continued, patient but insistent. Finally, she opened the door to find Dante standing in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his gray eyes. How did you find me? She asked. Does it matter? He looked past her into the generic hotel room. This is where you want to live now? In a place with no personality, no warmth, no connection to anything real? It's honest, she said simply. Which is more than I can say for our penthouse. Dante flinched. Can I come in, please? Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. He moved into the small space like a caged predator, too large and dangerous for the confines of the ordinary room. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble, about being my father's son, about possession versus love, and you were right. The admission seemed to cost him something vital. Everything I did, the manipulation, the orchestrated crisis, the marriage contract, it was exactly what he would have done. I told myself I was protecting you, but the truth is, I was protecting my ability to have you. Serafina stared at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. I've spent my entire adult life trying to be different from him, Dante continued, building something ethical, something clean, something that would prove I wasn't the monster he tried to create. But when I saw you, when I wanted you, I threw all of that away and became exactly what he taught me to be. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done lying. To you, to myself, to everyone. Dante sat heavily in the room's single chair, suddenly looking older than his 31 years. My father called me again this morning. What did he want? To gloat, to tell me how proud he was that I'd finally embraced my true nature. Dante's laugh was bitter. Do you know what he said when I told him I was going to let you go? Serafina shook her head. He said, no, you won't. Because letting her go would mean admitting you were wrong, and Blackthorn men are never wrong. We take what we want, and make the world adjust to accommodate us. He's not entirely incorrect, Serafina said quietly. No, he's not. But here's the thing. I don't want to be a Blackthorn man anymore. Dante looked up at her, and she saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Genuine humility. I want to be worthy of you, even if that means losing you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder of legal documents. What is that? Divorce papers, he said simply. Complete dissolution of our marriage contract. Your family gets their business back, free and clear, along with enough capital to ensure they never face financial difficulties again. You get a settlement that will set you up for life, whether you choose college, travel, or whatever future you want to build. Serafina stared at the papers, her heart hammering against her ribs. There's one condition, Dante continued. Of course there is. If you sign these papers, you never see me again. I disappear from your life completely. No contact, no interference, no checking up on you for your own good. You get to live whatever life you choose, free from my influence. The offer was everything she should want. Freedom. Financial security, the chance to start over without the weight of lies and manipulation. So why did the thought of never seeing Dante again make her chest ache? Why? She asked. What do you get out of this? The knowledge that I'm capable of putting your well-being above my own desires, Dante said simply. The chance to prove that love and possession aren't the same thing. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, the possibility of becoming someone worthy of the woman I fell in love with. Even if that means losing me, especially if it means losing you. His smile was sad but genuine. Real love isn't about keeping someone. It's about wanting them to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you. Serafina looked at the divorce papers, then back at Dante's face. She saw the man who had orchestrated her family's financial crisis, manipulated her into marriage, and possessed her under the guise of protection. But she also saw the man who was willing to give up everything to set her free. What happens to you? She asked. After this, I figure out how to be someone better than my father raised me to be. I try to build something real instead of something designed to serve my ego. I learn the difference between love and obsession. Dante stood up slowly, and I live with the knowledge that the best thing I ever did was let you go. Serafina picked up the papers, her hands shaking slightly. There's something else, Dante said quietly. My father, he's not done with us. He's planning something that will hurt you to get to me. As long as you're my wife, you're a target. But if we're divorced, I become irrelevant to his games. You become free. She looked at the man she'd fallen in love with. Complicated. Damaged, dangerous, but also capable of genuine sacrifice. The smart thing would be to sign the papers, take the money, and run as far from the Blackthorne family drama as possible. Instead, she set the papers aside. I'm not signing them, she said. Dante went very still. Serafina, I'm not signing them, she repeated more firmly, but I'm also not going back to the way things were. I don't understand. You engineered a crisis to get me to marry you, she said, moving closer to him. You manipulated my family, orchestrated our meeting, and designed a contract that gave me no real choice. All of that is true. Dante nodded, his expression guarded. But it's also true that you could have destroyed my family completely and taken what you wanted for a fraction of the cost. It's true that you've treated me with respect and tenderness, even when you thought I didn't know the whole story. And it's true that you're willing to give up everything to set me free. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe the man who created this mess isn't the same as the man who's trying to fix it. She reached up, touching his face gently. I'm saying that I still love you, even knowing what you did. But love isn't enough. Hope and despair warred in his expression. Then what is? Change, she said simply. Real change. Not just guilt or regret, but a fundamental shift in how you see me, us, this marriage. Tell me what you need. I need you to see me as your equal, not something fragile that needs protecting. I need you to include me in decisions instead of making them for me. I need you to trust that I'm strong enough to handle the truth, even when it's ugly. And if I can do that, then maybe we can build something real together. Not based on contracts or manipulation or your father's twisted version of love, but on genuine partnership. Dante stared at her, and she could see him processing her words, weighing the possibilities. It won't be easy, he said finally, changing patterns that have been ingrained for 30 years. Trusting someone else with real power in my life. No, she agreed. It won't be easy, but it will be honest. And if I fail, if I fall back into old patterns, then I walk away, she said simply. But this time, I walk away because I choose to. Not because you've decided it's what's best for me. Dante was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with the implications of what she was offering. A real marriage, built on equality instead of control. Your father won't like this, she said. My father can rot in his cell, Dante replied with sudden vehemence. I'm done letting his voice guide my decisions. Then what's your answer? Dante looked at the divorce papers, then at her face, and she saw the moment he made his choice. Tear them up, he said quietly. What? The papers. Tear them up, because you're right. love isn't enough. But love combined with respect, trust, and genuine partnership? He smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes. That might be everything. Serafina picked up the divorce papers and slowly ripped them in half. So what now? She asked. Now we go home, Dante said, taking her hands. And we figure out how to build a real marriage from the wreckage of a fake one. Together? Together, he confirmed. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no more decisions made for your own good without your input. And your father? We'll learn that some things are more important than winning. Dante's expression hardened. Starting with the woman I love. Chapter 11. New Foundations. The penthouse felt different when they returned. Lighter somehow, despite the weight of everything they needed to rebuild. Dante had insisted on showing Serafina every document related to her family's business, walking her through exactly how he'd orchestrated their financial crisis and what he'd done to resolve it. I want you to understand everything, he said as they sat in his office, papers spread across the mahogany desk. Every contract, every manipulation, every decision I made without your knowledge. Serafina studied the documents, her business degree finally, proving useful as she parsed the complex web of transactions and agreements. You were thorough, she said finally, ruthlessly. So. Dante's voice was tight with self-recrimination. I identified every vulnerability your family had and exploited them systematically. But you also built in protections, she pointed out, touching one of the contracts. This clause ensures my parents can never lose their home, even if the business fails. And this trust fund for their retirement, it's untouchable by creditors. I told myself that made it better. It doesn't make it right, Serafina agreed. But it shows that even when you were manipulating us, part of you was trying to protect us too. Dante looked up at her, surprise flickering in his gray eyes. You're defending me. I'm trying to understand you. There's a difference. She leaned back in her chair, studying his face. The question is, what do we do about it now? What do you want to do? The fact that he was asking, really asking, not just going through the motions before implementing his own plan, felt like progress. I want to tell my parents the truth, she said. All of it? All of it. They deserve to know what they're really dealing with. Dante was quiet for a long moment. They'll hate me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll understand that people are complicated and that you're trying to be better than you were. And if they demand you leave me? Serafina considered this. Then I'll explain that I'm staying because I choose to, not because I have to. That evening, they video called her parents together. Serafina had prepared for tears, anger, demands that she come home immediately. What she hadn't prepared for was her father's long silence after Dante finished explaining what he'd done. You destroyed our business, Robert Vale said finally, his voice carefully controlled. Yes, sir. You manipulated us into accepting a marriage contract that gave our daughter no real choice. Yes, sir. You orchestrated the entire situation to serve your own desires, regardless of the cost to our family. Dante's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Yes, sir. And now you're telling us this because your daughter deserves a marriage built on honesty instead of lies. Because she's teaching me the difference between love and possession, and because I owe you the truth, even if it costs me everything. Robert Vale studied Dante's face through the screen for a long moment. What's your plan now? He asked finally. To be the husband Serafina deserves. To build something real with her, if she'll let me. To spend the rest of my life proving that people can change. And our business remains yours free and clear, along with enough capital to expand into new markets if you choose. Even if we tell Serafina to leave you, even then. Serafina's mother had been crying quietly throughout the conversation, but now she spoke up. Serafina, sweetheart, what do you want? I want to stay married to him, Serafina said simply. Not because I have to, but because I believe he's capable of becoming the man I fell in love with. And if he disappoints you, then I'll leave, but this time, it will be my choice. Her parents exchanged a look that spoke of 30 years of marriage and shared understanding. We don't like this, her mother said finally. We don't like that you were manipulated, that our trust was exploited, that our daughter was essentially purchased like a commodity." "I understand," Dante said quietly. "But," her father continued, "we also don't like the idea of our daughter throwing away her chance at happiness because of past mistakes. If Serafina believes you can change, if she's willing to build something real with you, then we'll support her decision." "With conditions," her mother added firmly. "Name them," Dante said immediately. "First, no more secrets. If something affects our daughter, she knows about it immediately." "Agreed." "Second, Serafina maintains her own identity, her own interests, her own friends, her own goals that have nothing to do with your business or your world." "Agreed." "And third," her father's voice hardened, "if you ever manipulate or control our daughter again, we will make it our life's mission to destroy you. Business relationships, social connections, reputation, all of it. Do you understand?" Dante's smile was genuine. "Completely, and I respect you for it." After they hung up, Serafina and Dante sat in comfortable silence for a while. "That went better than expected," she said finally. "Your parents are remarkable people. I can see where you get your strength. They're also right about the conditions, especially the one about me maintaining my own identity." Dante nodded. "What do you want to do? College? Work? Travel?" "I want to go back to school," she said. "Finish my business degree, maybe get an MBA. And I want to be involved in your company." "Involved how?" "As a partner, not a figurehead. I want to understand how Blackthorn Industries really works, what decisions you make, and why. I want to help you build something ethical." "That could be complicated. People will assume you're only there because you're my wife." "Then I'll prove them wrong." Serafina's voice was firm. "I'm not asking for a cushy job or special treatment. I'm asking for the chance to earn my place beside you." Dante studied her face, and she could see him processing the implications. "It won't be easy," he said finally. "The business world can be brutal, especially to young women who are seen as potential weaknesses to exploit." "Let them try," Serafina said with a smile that was all teeth. "I learned from the best, after all." That night, as they lay in bed together, truly together, without secrets or lies between them, Dante traced patterns on her skin in the darkness. "I have something to confess," he said quietly. Serafina tensed. "What?" "When I first saw you at that charity gala, when I first decided I wanted you, I told myself it was because you were beautiful and innocent, and everything I'd never had. And now? Now I think it was because you were the first person who looked at me and saw potential for something better. Even before you knew me, even when I was just another rich stranger at a boring event, you smiled at me like I might be worth knowing." Serafina remembered that night. She'd been working as a server to earn money for college, and she'd accidentally spilled wine on an expensive-looking man's jacket. Instead of getting angry, he'd laughed and asked if she was okay. "You tipped me $100 for cleaning your jacket," she said softly. "You refused to take it. Because it was too much. Because I hadn't done anything to earn it." "You treated me like a human being instead of a walking bank account," Dante said. "Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Serafina turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "Is that really why you wanted me? Because I was kind to you? I wanted you because in that moment, when you refused my money and insisted on paying for the dry cleaning yourself, I saw what integrity looked like. And I realized I'd spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who would take whatever they could get from me, but I'd never met anyone who would refuse to take advantage. So you decided to take advantage instead. I decided I wanted to be close to that integrity, even if it meant compromising my own." Dante's laugh was self-deprecating. "I convinced myself that having you near me would make me a better person, but I never stopped to consider what being near me might do to you. And now? Now I know that real integrity isn't something you can possess or acquire by proximity. It's something you have to choose, every day, in every decision." He cupped her face gently. "Thank you for showing me the difference. Thank you for being willing to learn it." They made love then, slow and tender and full of promise. And for the first time since their wedding night, Serafina felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 12. The Final Test. 3 months later, Serafina was deep in preparation for her first board presentation when Elena burst into the study, her face pale with worry. "Mrs. Blackthorne, you need to see this." She handed Serafina a tablet displaying a news website. The headline made her blood run cold. "Blackthorne Industries, heir married to teenage gold digger. Exclusive photos and documents reveal shocking truth." The article was vicious, filled with half-truths and manipulated evidence designed to paint her as a calculating seductress who had trapped a vulnerable businessman. There were photos of her, from the charity gala, somehow made to look staged and predatory, alongside leaked financial documents that suggested her family had been complicit in orchestrating their own business crisis. "It gets worse," Elena said quietly, scrolling to the bottom of the article. "Look at the byline. The article was credited to Victoria Nash, in partnership with Marcus Blackthorne, writing from federal prison. Where's Dante?" Serafina asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "Emergency board meeting. The story broke an hour ago. The company's stock price has already dropped 12%. Serafina's phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Reporters, she realized. The story was everywhere, spreading across social media like wildfire. "Mrs. Blackthorne," Elena said gently, "maybe you should go somewhere private until this blows over." "No," Serafina said firmly. "Running away won't solve anything, and I'm not going to let Marcus Blackthorne win by hiding." She grabbed her purse and car keys, ignoring Elena's protests. "Where are you going?" "To do what Dante taught me," Serafina replied. "To take control of the narrative." 20 minutes later, she walked into the lobby of Blackthorne Industries, her head held high despite the stares and whispered conversations that followed her. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Blackthorne, I'm so sorry, the board meeting is—" "I'm not here for the board meeting," Serafina interrupted. "I'm here to speak to the press." Word of her arrival spread quickly. By the time she reached the executive conference room that served as a media center, reporters were already gathering, cameras ready, questions prepared. Dante appeared at her side, his face tight with worry and anger. "What are you doing?" he asked in a low voice. "What you taught me to do," she replied. "Fighting back. Serafina, you don't understand how vicious they can be." "Yes, I do. Because I just read what they're saying about us." She squeezed his hand. "Trust me." The next few minutes were a blur of camera flashes and shouted questions. Serafina stood at the podium, waiting for quiet, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the room. "My name is Serafina Blackthorne, and I'm here to address the allegations made in today's article. Mrs. Blackthorne, is it true that you seduced your husband for his money? Mrs. Blackthorne, did your family conspire to trap Dante Blackthorne into marriage? Mrs. Blackthorne, how do you respond to accusations that you're nothing more than a teenage gold digger?" She waited for the questions to die down, then began to speak. 3 months ago, I learned that my husband had orchestrated my family's financial crisis in order to create circumstances that would lead to our marriage. I learned that what I thought was a business arrangement designed to help my family was actually an elaborate manipulation designed to give him access to me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the denial they'd expected. I also learned that my husband was willing to give up everything: his company, his fortune, his carefully constructed life, to set me free when he realized what he'd done was wrong. "Are you confirming the allegations?" One reporter called out. "I'm confirming that relationships are complicated, that good people sometimes make terrible decisions, and that the capacity for change and growth is what separates love from obsession." Serafina paused, looking directly into the cameras. The article published today was written by Victoria Nash, a woman who had an 8-year relationship with my husband that ended when we married, in collaboration with Marcus Blackthorne, a convicted felon currently serving time for fraud and embezzlement. Their goal isn't to expose the truth, it's to destroy something real because they can't possess it themselves. "What about the financial documents?" Another reporter shouted. "Are authentic," Serafina replied calmly. "My husband did manipulate my family's business relationships to create our financial crisis. He did offer marriage as the solution, and I did agree to marry him to save my family from bankruptcy. The room erupted in questions, but she held up a hand for silence. But what the article doesn't tell you is that my husband could have destroyed my family completely and taken what he wanted for a fraction of the cost. It doesn't tell you that he built protections into our agreement to ensure my family would be financially secure regardless of what happened to our marriage. And it doesn't tell you that when he realized he'd become the kind of man he'd spent his life trying not to be, he offered to give me everything and disappear from my life forever. She could see Dante in her peripheral vision, his face a mix of pride and terror as she laid their entire relationship bare in front of the cameras. So yes, she continued, I married a man who manipulated my circumstances to get what he wanted. But I'm staying married to a man who was willing to sacrifice everything to give me what I needed. The freedom to choose. Are you saying you forgive him? A reporter called out. I'm saying I love him. Not because he's perfect, but because he's capable of growth, change, and genuine remorse. Because when faced with the choice between controlling me and loving me, he chose love. What about the age difference? You're only 19. I'm 20 now, Serafina corrected with a slight smile. And I'm a business student at Columbia University, working toward my MBA so I can be a partner in Blackthorn Industries, not just a wife. I'm also the daughter of parents who taught me that integrity matters more than comfort, that love requires courage, and that the best relationships are built on truth, not convenience, she paused, scanning the room full of reporters who were hanging on her every word. Marcus Blackthorn wants you to believe that his son is exactly like him, that we're all doomed to repeat the worst patterns of our parents, that love is just manipulation by another name, that people are incapable of genuine change. But I've seen what happens when someone chooses to be better than they were raised to be. I've seen what real love looks like when it's stripped of ego and control and possession. So you're denying the allegations? I'm not denying anything. I'm providing context that Marcus Blackthorn and Victoria Nash deliberately omitted because the truth doesn't serve their agenda of destruction. Serafina's voice hardened. They want to paint me as a victim or a villain because those are the only narratives they understand. What they can't comprehend is a woman who knows exactly what she's choosing and why. Mrs. Blackthorn, a voice called from the back. What would you say to young women who might find themselves in similar situations? Serafina considered the question carefully. I'd say that love isn't supposed to trap you, diminish you, or take away your choices. Real love expands your world, respects your autonomy, and makes you braver than you were before. If someone claims to love you but tries to control your decisions, limit your opportunities, or isolate you from the people who care about you, that's not love, that's possession. She glanced at Dante, who was watching her with something close to awe. But I'd also say that people are complicated, that good intentions can lead to terrible decisions, and that the capacity for change is what makes us human. Sometimes the most broken people are capable of the most profound transformation if they're willing to do the work. Are you concerned about your safety? Another reporter asked. Marcus Blackthorn has a history of violence against those who oppose him. For the first time, Serafina's composure flickered. Marcus Blackthorn is in federal prison where he belongs. As for Victoria Nash, she looked directly into the camera. I understand that watching someone you cared about choose happiness with someone else is painful. But trying to destroy that happiness won't bring him back to you. It just proves that you never understood what love actually means. One final question, Mrs. Blackthorn. A reporter from the front row called out. Do you have any regrets about your marriage? Serafina smiled, and for the first time since stepping up to the podium, it was completely genuine. My only regret is that it took me so long to realize that the strongest foundation for a marriage isn't perfection, it's honesty. My husband and I built our relationship on secrets and manipulation, and we nearly lost everything because of it. But we're rebuilding it on truth, respect, and genuine partnership. That's not a fairy tale ending. It's something better. It's real. As she stepped away from the podium, the questions continued flying, but she didn't answer them. She'd said what she needed to say. Dante caught her arm as they walked toward the elevators. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless, he said quietly. Maybe both. You didn't have to do that. You could have let me handle it, could have stayed out of the spotlight. And let your father control the narrative about our marriage? Not a chance. Serafina faced him as the elevator doors closed. We're partners now, remember? That means we face things together. Even when facing them might destroy everything we've built? Especially then. That evening, as they watched the news coverage from their penthouse, Serafina was amazed by how the story had shifted. Instead of focusing on the sensational allegations, most outlets were running clips of her press conference, analyzing her words about love versus possession, change versus stagnation. Your phone's been ringing all day, Dante said, settling beside her on the couch. Interview requests, speaking opportunities, offers from publishers who want you to write a book about our relationship. Not interested. Not even the offer from Columbia Business School? They want you to guest lecture on crisis management and corporate transparency. That caught her attention. Really? Professor Martinez said your press conference was a masterclass in controlling narrative without sacrificing authenticity. Dante's smile was proud. She also said you'd make an excellent addition to their corporate communications program. I'm already enrolled in their MBA program. As a dual degree candidate, apparently. If you're interested. Serafina considered this. 6 months ago, she'd been a college dropout working part-time at a bookstore. Now she was being offered the chance to study at one of the most prestigious business schools in the country. What do you think? She asked. I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Dante said simply. I think you've proven that you're capable of anything you set your mind to. And I think anyone who underestimates you is going to regret it. Including you, especially me. He pulled her closer. I spent so much time trying to protect you from the world that I forgot to appreciate how capable you are of protecting yourself. And our marriage? How do you think we handled today? Dante was quiet for a moment, considering. I think we survived the first real test of whether we could be genuine partners instead of just husband and wife, he said finally. I think you showed the world, and me, what strength actually looks like. And I think my father is probably regretting his decision to come after us. As if summoned by their conversation, Dante's phone rang. The caller ID showed the familiar prison number. Answer it, Serafina said. Are you sure? I'm sure. Dante put the call on speaker. Hello? Marcus. That was quite a performance your wife gave today. Marcus's voice was carefully controlled, but Serafina could hear the frustration underneath. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. The truth? Marcus laughed, cold and bitter. The truth is that you manipulated a teenage girl into marriage and she's developed Stockholm Syndrome. The truth is that you're exactly like me, no matter how much you pretend otherwise. You're wrong, Serafina said, speaking directly into the phone. Your son is nothing like you. Ah, the little princess speaks. Tell me, sweetheart, do you really believe that fairy tale you sold to the press? That love conquers all and people can change their fundamental nature? I believe that some people are capable of growth, while others are so committed to their own toxicity that they can't imagine anyone choosing to be different. And which category do you think I fall into? The second, Serafina said without hesitation. You had 30 years to choose to be a better father, and instead you spent that time trying to turn your son into a reflection of your worst qualities. Even now, from prison, you're still trying to destroy anything good in his life because you can't stand the idea that he might be capable of something you never were. Which is? Love, real love. The kind that makes you want to be better, instead of dragging everyone else down to your level. The silence stretched so long that Serafina wondered if Marcus had hung up. You think you've won, he said. Finally. I think I've chosen happiness over bitterness, partnership over control, and growth over stagnation. Serafina replied. If that's winning, then yes. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Dante said firmly. Serafina and I are building something real together. Something that has nothing to do with you or your twisted games. You can spend the rest of your sentence plotting our destruction, or you can find some way to make peace with the fact that I'm not you. Either way, we're done letting you have power over our lives. I'm your father. You're the man who donated sperm. Dante corrected. A father would have wanted his son to be happy. A father would have celebrated his son's growth instead of trying to sabotage it. You're just a bitter old man who can't stand to see other people succeed where you failed. Marcus hung up without another word. In the quiet that followed, Serafina and Dante sat together, processing what felt like the end of a very long, very difficult chapter. "Do you think that's really the end of it?" Serafina asked. "I think Marcus will keep trying to hurt us for as long as he's alive," Dante said honestly. "But I also think we've proven that we can handle whatever he throws at us." Together? Together. That night, as they prepared for bed, Serafina caught sight of herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. The frightened 19-year-old who had signed a marriage contract to save her family was gone. In her place was a woman who looked confident, strong, and genuinely happy. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how much has changed in less than a year." "Good changes? The best changes." She leaned back against him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently? If you hadn't orchestrated the crisis? If I hadn't been desperate? If we just encountered each other naturally?" "Sometimes," Dante admitted. "But then I think about everything we've learned about each other, about ourselves, about what real love actually requires. I'm not sure we could have gotten here any other way. Through manipulation and lies and near divorce? Through testing every possible breaking point and discovering that what we have is strong enough to survive it all." He turned her in his arms so she was facing him. "I'm not proud of how this started, Serafina, but I'm proud of what we've built from the wreckage." "What have we built?" "A partnership. A real marriage. A foundation strong enough to handle anything the world throws at us." His smile was soft, genuine. A love story that doesn't end with, "and they lived happily ever after," but with, "and they chose each other every day, even when it was difficult." "I like that better than a fairy tale," Serafina said. "Good," Dante replied, kissing her softly. "Because fairy tales are for children, and we're building something for adults. Something real." As they settled into bed together, Serafina reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They'd started with a contract designed to solve practical problems, survived revelations that could have destroyed them, and emerged as genuine partners committed to building something lasting. It wasn't the love story she'd imagined as a girl, but it was better. It was honest, hard-won, and built to last. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Dante replied. "Thank you for teaching me the difference." Outside their windows, the city sparkled with lights, full of other stories, other people trying to figure out how to love and be loved in a complicated world. But inside their home, Serafina Blackthorne and her husband had found something rare. A love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger for it, and that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep in Dante's arms, was worth every moment of the struggle it had taken to get there.